Evil races or bad game design. Is that it? Okay, here we go. Dislike ratio? Yeah, it's pretty bad. Yeah, that's actually really bad. They'll probably have to talk to YouTube to get those removed. Like Disney.
If you paid attention to the game's discourse on the internet during 2019 and 2020, you might have noticed a reoccurring argument about some species from fantasy media, specifically orcs. Now, not to worry. This episode isn't going to be just another member of the...
How can you possibly say orcs? How can you use orcs? What real-life race has anything to do with orcs? Orcs are like Neanderthals. Everybody used to be a Neanderthal. There are existing, as I said, goblins literally have Jewish stereotypes built into their fucking in-game culture. In many games. It's the same as in Harry Potter. Think about that. It's the same basic fucking shit. And you're gonna go with orcs? Orcs are like the worst example.
Boris talking about how if all orcs in a game are blindly evil, that it's racist. Instead, we want to discuss how that particular choice is simply bad game design.
Okay. This is something that happens in real life too, okay? I'll give you a real-world example of a race of things that are evil. Wasps. Wasps are evil. They're evil. There are no good wasps. They're all fucking assholes. So these exist in real life. Okay? So I don't want to hear about this, oh, there's no evil things. Like, yes, what about a wasp, man? What about a fucking wasp?
Thanks so much to NordVPN for sponsoring today's episode. To take
You're
control
welcome.
of your internet security,
You're
get
welcome.
a huge discount on a 2-year plan, and get 1 month free, use code EXTRACREDITS at nordvpn.com/extracredits.
We'll have to make sure we do that.
Real quick up top, please welcome James Mendez-Hodes, who guest wrote this episode. Thanks so much, Mendez. Much of the recent conversation on orcs points out that...
Okay, so is this really what they did here? They brought a different person on so they could release a very controversial video with having the person who actually made the video not have a direct relationship to the company that's putting out the videos, so they can have plausible deniability and distance themselves from the video if it goes badly. However, they can still claim the ad revenue and the clout from people talking about it. Very cute. Very, very cute. I like that. That's the same thing that most news companies do.
characterizing a whole species in your game as ugly, warlike, and malevolent might be harmful to real-world groups regularly mischaracterized as ugly, warlike, and malevolent. However, this video isn't...
I'm sorry to say, every group of people in the world has been warlike and malevolent. This is not... Nobody has a monopoly over this. Every group in the world has done this. Are you kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? This is so crazy.
that. Though if you want more on that discussion, Mendez breaks it down wonderfully over on his website, and we'll have a link to that
Plausible
in the description.
deniability.
But here, we're going to talk about something related. Why characterizing a group like this in your game can be lazy at best, and at worst, actively harmful to the world you're creating. When designing a game's world and populating it with fictional species, a designer might be tempted to differentiate them from one another by certain inalienable qualities, like their moral alignment, violent versus peaceful, law versus chaos, good versus evil, and the like. It's a common trope in speculative fiction, but especially in the context of a game, painting an entire species with the same moral brush actually weakens the entire thing. This idea that a certain subgroup, like race, nationality, or sex, has inalienable traits, is called biological essentialism, or simply bioessentialism. And it's a valid way to talk about qualities like how many legs an animal has, or whether it can fly. But all too often, this concept gets misused in untrue statements, like pit bulls are a violent breed, men are more logical than women, or Asians are better at math.
What? What? How do you go from one to another? That's crazy. Like, a pit bull dog? Like, there are literal statistics that show that pit bulls attack people at a way higher ratio than other things. Like, this is a massive logical leap that you can use between pit bulls or certain other types of animals being violent and having a violent tendency to like certain races being better at math. Like, this is a massive fucking difference.
Now, chances are, if a game is set in the real world, that the designers are avoiding these tropes because they aren't real, as multiple fields of societal and hard science can readily prove to you. But speculative fiction offers us an opportunity to reify or make real various things which don't exist, or to exaggerate things which do. Now, bioessentialism is a tempting idea in fantasy for some of the same reasons as it is in the real world. Because to our human minds, broad generalizations are comforting. They reduce the world to simple cut and dry categories.
It's easy.
All orcs bad, all elves good, root for these folks, not for these folks. But just like in the real world, bioessentialism can present problems in fiction as well, specifically a moral one. The idea that a sapient species can inherently tend towards good or evil acts, or lawful or chaotic ones. And that moral essentialism actually undercuts the greatest strength games can bring to storytelling: the player's own power to make meaningful, interesting choices and judgments for their characters, including moral ones. So if a game's creative choices apply a moral valuation to every member of an...
I don't know. I can see kind of what he's saying here. Obviously, it does kind of make sense, but I think also it's a matter of like what degree and what scope you want to have with your story. There are some stories that people are trying to tell that they don't really want to get into moralism or anything like that. I think like Tolkien doesn't really have a whole lot of that kind of stuff. Other things do, like things like Game of Thrones has like a lot more gray areas. But some things are black and white. Like Warcraft, yeah.
Entire species before the players even meet them. Well, now that's just taking that power away from the players. And in turn, if a group of orcs, for instance, doesn't even have a choice about their actions, are they actually evil? Because look, if a person, say, destroys a house, we call that evil because they chose to do so. But if a tornado destroys a house, well, I mean, is wind evil? No. Therefore, if a game's world building chooses to program every member of a species to destroy, aren't they more like the tornado? Now, if the player's characters are able to make moral choices, but an entire class...
I think that's definitely an interesting perspective. It's an interesting perspective, but usually the truth is that it's not really that simple with a lot of these different situations. So like in Warcraft 2, most evil things in video games are not evil from their own perspective. And I guess I can give like the best example of this is Thanos, right? Thanos from Infinity War. Where Thanos from Infinity War is not, from his perspective, he's the good guy. From his perspective, he's doing the right thing and he's trying to save the world and save the universe. So generally, it's not this cut and dried, it's a matter of perspective. So you're playing the race that's defending against this other race that's trying to do X, Y, or Z thing. And they're trying to get what they want, and what they want is your stuff. So it's not really fundamentally evil, it's just from the perspective that you're in that it's evil. Does that make sense? You know, like the Scarlet Crusade. I think Scarlet Crusade in WoW is another really good example. Scarlet Crusade in WoW is they think that they're doing the right thing. The Scarlet Crusade does not believe that they are evil. And I do think that is a core important element to storytelling. Every once in a while, you can have a pure evil character, like the Moon in Majora's Mask, or like the Joker in Batman. The Joker in Batman is an evil character. It is aware that it is an evil character. The Joker knows he's evil. And he does evil things on purpose. It's chaos. I mean, like, is chaos evil? That's a really interesting question. I feel like the Joker knows to some degree. If you were to ask the Joker, like, you know, let's say Heath Ledger's Joker. If you were to ask Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight, are you a good guy or a bad guy? He'd probably say he's a bad guy. Am I wrong? I would kind of expect that. But all I'm saying is like having some pure evil characters that exist just purely to do bad shit, I think is okay. But at the same time, yeah, I mean, many of the races and things like that in the games, like the orcs, for example, in WoW, they're attacking Azeroth and they're considered evil to the people in Azeroth. But the reason why they're leaving Draenor is because all their shit's burned down, and like the world's destroyed. So of course they're gonna come over to the Azeroth and fight for it. Of course, because they have to. And that's what I think is the best story, is that you can see the good in actions and the evil in actions. But having like a pure just evil race that just does bad things, etc., I think that only really makes sense logically if you have like something like a wasp that doesn't have a lot of like real thinking. You know, it's like instinctually based. Does that make sense? He would consider himself good. Fight against the system and fail people like him. I don't know. I feel like that's people that are injecting their own headcanon into it. What's this here? Video has been pretty much on point. Why is everyone triggered? Well, everything on the video is on point. Well, the reason why I think people are triggered about this is because there's like a real world connotation to this. And also it's trying to tell people and inject, basically, I think the video is trying to inject real world politics and real world like viewpoints on real world races into a video game and draw a distinction between the two of them, when many people don't have that distinction. And then this other person who is considered like an other is coming into the space and then telling all these people that they're racist or bad for doing something that they don't think is racist or bad. So that's why. It's because this person is injecting themselves into a space that they're not in, or like a game that they're not in, and then telling the people that are there that they're wrong. That's why. Anyway, let's keep going.
If NPCs is inherently evil regardless of their choice, then the game is either telling the player that moral choices don't matter, or it's simply driving a wedge between the player's morality and the morality that applies to the rest of the world, blocking the player from further becoming a part of it. For instance, in Warhammer 40k, this inconsistency is central to the Imperium of Man's villainous creed. Individuals' human choices make them good or evil, whereas aliens are created evil. And of course, Games Workshop made that choice to facilitate a war game where lethal violence is the only option. But then folks also saw that in the 40k novels and RPGs, which required more interesting narrative complexities, Imperial heroes have to grapple with and recognize the illogic of that creed based on their own experience.
I think there's a lot of games like let's say Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers is a good example of this. Super Mario Brothers doesn't need to explain to you that there are some good Goombas, or Bowser is just misunderstood. So for the sake of storytelling, I think that it's reasonable in many cases to just have stories where there are just some evil monsters and that's all there is to it. Now, if you get into, like in Warcraft, I remember, I'll give you an example. You remember Lothraxion in patch 7.3 on the Justicar, not Justicar, the Vindicar. And he was like the light-forged Dreadlord. That was really cool, wasn't it? That was awesome. So having things like that in more complex story games and fantasy games is really cool. Now, is it necessary? I don't think that it's necessary. But it's also, it can make things more interesting. I do think that having gray areas and seeing the dark side of good and the good side of bad does make stories more compelling generally, but I don't think this is necessarily something that needs to happen in stories, and it's not necessarily something that furthers any sort of racial stereotypes in real life. I think that correlation is insane. That is an insane correlation to me. God Emperor purged an whole planet of his worshippers. Well, doesn't the God Emperor doesn't he like, because like he got wounded by Horus, right? And doesn't he need to sacrifice like 10,000 psychers or whatever a day in order to keep himself alive? Yeah. So obviously God Emperor, like you would assume that the God Emperor is the good guy, and also there's also the meta level of the God Emperor, like not even really wanting to be in that state or to exist in that state to begin with, but people are just kind of keeping him in that state. So I think it's actually very complex, and that's really cool. But again, with this, I just don't like the real life equivalency.
Okay, but now you might be asking, what if you're playing the kind of game where you're engaging in violence because it's exciting and fun, not because of its moral dimensions, where the meaningful choice is about tactics rather than ethics?
Yeah.
Maybe the goal is to take moral calculus out of the problem. Sure, one solution might be saying, all orcs are evil, go ahead and shoot them. But in that situation, as soon as someone inadvertently feels some empathy, as people often do for anything seeming even vaguely alive.
Listen, nobody felt empathy for a Furby, okay? Can I please just fucking, like, it's a fucking Furby. Like, who, like, those of you guys, like, fucking boomers out there, who saw this? Oh, that's my baby. Oh, that's a little baby. Give me a fucking break. I fed them. My mom did too. Okay, I'll be honest. It did. It's reeing, apparently. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a, like, this is an interesting, I'll give my full take on the video when we finish, okay?
The easy answer becomes less easy. And if the goal of your game is to stop players from engaging in moral debates and just fight some bad guys, you kind of gotta say something more reliable than, oh, it's fine, they were all born this way. Fortunately, the real world...
Well, not every game requires a backstory. Like, Mario Brothers doesn't require a backstory. It's real simple. Bowser stole Princess Peach. He said, "You're coming with me now." And he took her to his castle. Which, by the way, I would rather live in Bowser's castle than fucking Mario's apartment. So I don't even know why Peach wants to go back. I mean, really, like, Bowser's a pimp. Bowser's a straight up pimp. Like, Mario's a loser. Like, straight up, like, Mario's a goddamn fucking loser. Bowser's a goddamn pimp. Like, why do you think Peach just every time accidentally just randomly gets stuck with Bowser again? You think this happens on accident? Come on, Mario. You gotta wake up, man. You gotta fucking wake up, Mario. It's embarrassing.
It's made progress on this problem, because sometimes in this day and age, people actually bear visual signifiers which say, I'm evil, not because of where I was born, but because of the choices I've made, such as Nazi uniforms and clan hoods. Then in fiction, we have things like the Hydra logo, a clear visual signifier.
And that's the thing, right, is you do have these people, so I'll give you an example. The Nazis are a very good example of this. The Nazis thought that they were doing the right thing. Do you know what their fucking logo was? God with us. They genuinely thought that they were doing the right thing. And I think that's a great example, is that you have people and they do bad stuff and they think that they're doing the right stuff. That is the best story. And almost all examples, like, I think this video is contradicting itself. Because those examples there, the people, the fucking clowns in the hoods and with the stupid fucking uniforms on from the 1940s, the goddamn Nazis, they thought that they were doing the right thing. They are evil. They are the bad guy. The Crusades are the same thing. A lot of those Crusaders, man, like, why do you think they're just killing people like crazy? Because they know they're going to get forgiven for all their sins. They basically, it's like almost that they're admitting that they're evil because they know that they're going to get sent in. You see what I mean? Remember, Asmongold, Nazis were everyday people who ended up committing atrocities. Yeah. I think people really don't understand this, because let me go ahead and open this over here. Let's see. So yeah. These guys think they're doing the right thing. They're not, but they think they are. And so I think that it's very odd that that he's using this example of these things that are pure evil, because it's always a matter of perspective. And I think, and I hope most people think, these guys are evil, but all I'm saying is that from their perspective, it's not, and that's what tells a good story. It's same with Thanos, same with a bunch of other stuff too. Does that make sense?
Clan hoods. Then in fiction, we have things like the Hydra logo, a clear visual signifier, but one that denotes choice, not birth. And if the statement that a game is making with its backstory and symbols is that an enemy had a choice and they chose wrong, then that gets way less complicated for a game that's interested in uncomplicated violence. So whether a game does or doesn't want its players to overthink their characters' moral choices, evil as a choice is just more effective than evil as a bioessential trait. But then, of course, if everyone...
I think generally evil is a choice, like, so... Yeah, you have, like, aliens, you have, like, the Flood and Halo, like, things that are just pretty much... I guess, like, it depends on, like... again, evil is many times, like, it's a perspective. Like, what characters... this is actually a question I have for you guys. What characters can you think of that are evil in stories, that know they're evil, that accept they're evil, that say that they're evil, and they're like, I'm a bad guy, period. So Sauron, I don't think Sauron is a good example, because Sauron follows Melkor, and Melkor rebelled against Iluvatar, and Melkor, I don't know, like, Ungoliath in Silmarillion is definitely a good example. Melkor and Sauron, I don't think are that good of examples. The Sith, I don't think are good examples either. Because the Sith it's emotionally based. Like, the parity between, or like what's the word for it? The distinction between like Sith and Jedi is not good versus evil. It's emotion versus no emotion. You see what I'm saying? The Diablo, Prime Evils. I do think, all right, Diablo, Prime Evils, yes, that's a good one. Voldemort, that's really almost. Like, almost. Because Voldemort is, he's self-serving, right? He wants to live forever. He cares about power, he cares about living forever. Like, I don't think that he really necessarily I don't know, would he want to do evil, or does he do evil because he thinks it's necessary or because it's easier? I don't know. I think Voldemort might be a good example. I never read the Harry Potter books, so I don't know a lot of the backstory behind it. Frieza. See, I don't know about Frieza because I never finished Frieza Saga. They kept replaying the episode right before Goku killed him, and I got bored and I stopped watching Dragon Ball Z. Plankton. No, Plankton. No, not Plankton. Plankton just wants to have. This is all it is. Plankton just wants to have a fine, upstanding establishment with the chum bucket. But fucking Mr. Krabs sends SpongeBob over to do some fucking corporate espionage and fuck over Plankton. That's all it is. Plankton's just trying to get by, man. He's like this big. What about Doomsday? So Doomsday is a good example, right? So Doomsday is the reincarnated corpse or reanimated corpse of Zod, right? Was that just in the movie or was that in the comics too? So no, he's not. Oh, it's just in the movies. Okay, I don't remember what it was. If it was the same in the comics, but I thought it was interesting in the movie. Anyway, so I think that you have examples of this, of like more simple-minded and like more simple individuals, like Goombas in WoW, or not WoW, Goombas in Mario universe are a good example of this. Goombas are stupid. So the dumber an animal is, and the dumber a species is, the easier it is to rationalize why it's just universally evil.
Wearing the evil team uniform happens to be an orc, or if every orc happens to have chosen team evil, the game wouldn't exactly be communicating that difference very well. A quick fix here would be to show some diversity in the evil team's hiring practices. For instance, with evil humans and elves as well as orcs. Or conversely, introduce orcs who have chosen good and neutral as well as evil. And a good example of a series getting better and better at this over time is Mass Effect. Because in the first game, Commander Shepard never meets a nice Batarian or a fun Geth. But then, spoiler alert, most of these evil species turn out to be as complex and interesting as the human ones as the trilogy progresses.
Well, this is the exact same thing as WoW. Like, WoW in Warcraft 1 and 2, like, the Horde were generally evil aligned and the Alliance were generally, good aligned. And then in Warcraft 3, they added a lot more gray area and a lot more nuance to it. And I think, like, it's like, for example, in World of Warcraft, you had, even in Shattrath, you were interacting sometimes with like other orcs that were friendly if you were Alliance or vice versa. But I think the best example of this in WoW is the Argent Crusade, where you have all races that are all fighting under the banner of the Argent Crusade. And I do think that's good. That is a good thing. I think that really, I'll talk about the video fully when I finish.
Broad moral generalizations about species or culture not only doesn't make internal sense, but it also leads to less evocative, less rewarding worlds and games. But we can solve that problem by following our best creative instincts to diversify, deepen, and complicate the worlds we create and its denizens. This way, players won't be incentivized to make snap judgments about our game's orcs or aliens or undead based on moral absolutes or body types. Instead, we'll all be driven to investigate, explore, and learn. Our players will invest themselves more in our games, And because they're human, ask the hard questions to push our design into even more enriching and unexpected places. Plus, maybe if we ditch this whole evil races line of thinking, if one day orcs or extra-dimensional horrors or even isekai protagonists pop out of a portal, they'll offer us humans the same courtesy. I'd call that a win-win.
I think that's a little
Once
bit
again,
ridiculous.
thanks so much to NordVPN for sponsoring this episode.
Did the video really deserve all those dislikes? Here's why people didn't like the video, okay? Because the point of the video, I think, was a relatively good point. Is that having characters that are multidimensional and having characters that have their own motivations that are not just purely I exist in order to be a plot device to cause you trouble makes for better storytelling. I think that's true. And I think that a good example of that being compelling is Game of Thrones. Is that Game of Thrones is very compelling because every of the different houses are heroes in their own story. So the idea of the video is good. It's a good idea on a fundamental level. I think the problem and the reason why people don't like the video is because of the real world relationship that it creates and the real world connections that it makes. So for example, I think people are totally fine with the idea that, oh, it's really cool to have like races, like undead or whatever that have like a good element to them as well. And WoW has that. That's cool. But the problem is that whenever you take those different tropes and then you apply them to having a real life application. And I think that that's really why people didn't like the video, is because they tried to liken it to real world stereotypes and real world racial tensions in a way that I think many people feel insulting and patronizing because they don't view video games and orcs as like a allegory to a real life race. So I think that's why people didn't like the video. It's because it was trying to draw a real world correlation. This video equals dog shit take? Well, no, it's a little bit more than that, right? That's all I'm saying. If a race in a video game makes you think differently of a race in real life, then you're a fucking moron. I agree with that. Griffith did nothing wrong. I do not agree with that. Let's see, right? But it doesn't mean we should remove evil races from everything, real world correlation or otherwise. Well, I think that it depends. Like, ultimately, I always have a problem whenever people want to make these rules in storytelling and then expect everybody else to tell their stories around those rules. I think it's very important for people to have creative freedom to do what they want to do. So there are many stories that just don't have the same type of logical or like narrative depth to tell the story of why the evil characters in the game do the evil things that they do. Like, and obviously, like, I think WoW is a good example of this. Warcraft 1 and Warcraft 2 didn't really have that narrative depth. And then Warcraft 3 created the narrative depth, and then the story became, I think, more compelling. But it doesn't mean that Warcraft 2 is a bad game because it didn't have it. I think there are plenty of times where you can have battles of good and evil and not have to explain the reasons why the evil things do something wrong and still have a fulfilling experience for the player. But from a narrative perspective, it's harder to do that if you don't understand like where the evil is coming from. You see what I'm saying? Lame unnecessary video made for pandering. No, this video, as I said, this is a video that's made, it's made explicitly to be inflammatory. It's made explicitly to get people mad, get them talking about it. And that's why I think they brought on a guest writer for the episode so they can have plausible deniability and distance themselves from the video itself if it does go bad, which it did, while at the same time claiming the ad revenue and the conversations around it. So I think that's clearly what it was. I think that they knew they were bringing this video out. They knew that it was inflammatory, and that's why they had a guest writer do it. And you see this all the time nowadays with like these different like companies and these different like publishing places, is they will have a, like, let's say a contractor or a freelance writer put out an article that's like, 8 things that white people need to stop doing, or 8 things that, make Asians, I don't know, like, whatever. I don't even want to say it because then somehow people will probably make that into a bad thing. But the point that I'm saying is that they will make these articles that are super inflammatory, and then those articles will generate a huge amount of conversation. and all of the conversation is centered around the article, which then makes the publisher money, and then the publisher can just easily distance themselves from the person who's writing the article, and it's just like really, really bad. It's like a bad faith cycle of producing media that you know is mostly untrue and inflammatory in order to make money. And the goal of the media is not to advance human knowledge. It's not to make the world a better place. It's just purely to enrage people and make them mad, and do that at the expense, or basically take that expense and do it for money. I'll read some of the comments and we'll see what people say. Imagine looking at an orc and saying, hey, that's an ethnic minority, then calling somebody else racist. True and real. I'm not racist, but let me compare races of real people to fictional races. Yeah, and this is the problem, right? Is that it's the real world correlation that they made. If they had just talked explicitly about the stories themselves, that's totally fine. But drawing the real world correlation is, I think, what made people mad. I like how people only remember this channel exists whenever they have a really cringy video. Well, exactly. And they brought out the really cringy video to remind people that they exist by getting people to talk about it and getting them mad about it. That's exactly what they did. Alright, so lucky YouTube's gonna remove dislikes in a couple of weeks. Yeah. I don't know. So do you guys think that's pretty much where it's at? Tolkien said the orcs were inspired by the unpleasant features of some Mongols. Some dumb video though. I don't know. I haven't read, like, I've listened to a lot of things that Tolkien has said, but I don't remember listening to that or hearing that before. I don't know. So you're saying Extra Credits channel is written... yeah, Extra Credits channel is run by a well-written evil character. Yes, they are doing evil by intentionally causing discord, but from their perspective, they're doing it because they need money. That is an evil character with a good fucking intent. There it is, boys. There it fucking is.